Welcome to the show. My guest tonight works in a world most of us never see, but we've all experienced. He's a composer and music director behind some of the biggest live moments on the planet, including the Olympics. Dave Pierce, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here. That's a big studio audience I'm hearing in my head. It's amazing. But no, I'm really thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'll add it in post. So we have a lot to talk about today. But I want to start before the Olympics and major broadcasts. What did your early career look like?
Oh, it was fantastic. I grew up in this incredible community of Calgary and rural area. I lived in Okotoks and found myself in High River and Black Diamond and all of the surrounding areas making music. And it was through those experiences of going out into the community and playing. So I started as early as 5 years old being the little drummer boy in the Christmas pageant. There's still people in Calgary to this day who call me the little drummer boy because they were at the school and saw me in fifth grade or as a 5-year-old. And so I started playing the drums, and then I played the marimba and all of these instruments. And I went to study music at the Mount Royal Conservatory. And it was there that I got really exposed to performing with the youth orchestra and what that meant. And then there was a group called the Calgary Fiddlers. And then there was the Youth Singers of Calgary, then the Young Canadians of Calgary, that perform in the Calgary Stampede. All of those youth groups that engaged the young people of the community, I got to participate in all of them because I was a little bit of a prodigy. I had my scopes set from about the age of 8 years old that I wanted to be a music arranger and a music director for shows and for Olympics, stuff like that. And then during high school, the Olympics in '88 happened in Calgary. And I believe it was probably the last moment of transition between showing up to get into a rehearsal at the McMahon Stadium, which is where I would stand on the sidelines and I'd watch Tommy Banks and David Foster making the music for the Olympics. And it was the last moment I could go through with a pass, and a volunteer would go through a binder looking for my name to check me off. So there was no computers checking who was going in and out. And I was in 10th grade, and I missed the entire time the Olympics were happening. I didn't make it to school because I was obsessed with going through these rehearsal spots with my pass to be able to just stand on the sidelines and watch how it all happened. And it was there that I stood and I realized the next time Canada hosts the Olympic Games, I want to be the guy that makes the music. I want to do all of these wonderful things because the Olympic movement is something that is so incredibly overwhelming for anyone who is creating anything, but definitely the music for your home country is something much different. I've been fortunate now to do Olympic size events and opening ceremonies around the world and world expos and things like that, where the music of the home, wherever is home for that ceremony, I love to get integrated into that. But it all started back when the '88 Olympics came to Calgary, and I stood on those sidelines with my pass very proudly, feeling like I was a young Calgarian who was going to ace this test. And at that point, I didn't know what my future would hold, but the level of commitment that I had to that dream that the '88 Olympics made by being in my hometown, that was the spark that's brought me here and got me on this couch with you today.
That's amazing. That's inspiring. You made it happen. How did you go from A to B? What was your first job in the music industry?
Well, my first real job was I got I got to play with the National Ballet Orchestra when I was about 13 years old. I joined the Musicians Union, and they needed someone to play the cymbals, the crash cymbals of the pit or of the orchestra. And it was a beautiful time in the 80s in Calgary because music was just starting to flourish. So if there was 3 people in town who could play the drums, which I was one of them, then we would all share the work around because there wasn't enough talent for the demand. And this is all live music. And there was such a vibrant scene here that so many of us would start to develop our talents together. I'm thinking of someone like Russ Broom, who I know you've had on the show. And I started playing music with Russ when I was about 13 years old. And so there's this magic fiber of Calgary that to this day, we export these incredible creative products that are consumed through streaming and through broadcast and all of the creative people who exist in Calgary and work at a world-class level. That is, it's something to be super proud of coming from here. And so starting off that first job took me through to, I started to play with the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And my teacher, my music teacher at the time, not my school music teacher, but the one who was teaching me how to play the drums, he started showing me all of these scores. And he was also the personnel manager with the orchestra for quite a long time. And so he gave me these opportunities to function at a high professional level at a very early age because I loved it. I knew that 12 years of going to school felt like a jail sentence. From about the second week of first grade, I was like, oh, I got to figure out how to do this for 12 years. Oh, like, can't they see I got to get out and play music and I've got to make music? And so I was so thrilled to have this community behind me that saw me as something that they didn't quite understand where it was going or what I was doing. Definitely, there was always questions like, why is he dressed like that? And what is he imagining? And meanwhile, I see myself as David Bowie walking down the street, and I've scored, more fireworks shows than any other human being on the planet. And I've done all these things that are in my head, but I didn't really realize until quite recently how much of that has been like a Willy Wonka, don't look behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz sort of scenario. And now I'm really bringing it out. I feel much more comfortable sharing, especially in my community that I just love so much. When I'm in Calgary, I get to just walk amongst all the love that comes from this creative environment that we have here. And it has a lot to do with the actual ground that we stand on, feeling in our hearts like we're home.
Early on, did you have what were the skills other than pure talent that it took to kind of make it early in your career?
I have this guiding light, and it's called the Prairie Scrambler. And it's a term that I used with my mentor for a long time who passed away very suddenly right before the Olympics in 2010 occurred. And he was a music contractor who would put together orchestras for Broadway shows. And he came from Winnipeg. And the two of us would talk about putting together orchestras to play various shows. And it was almost like we had the same skill that I've seen other people talk about baseball or football. And who do we put together? We need a lead guy. We need somebody with this background for the saxophone and somebody this. And then you have to get them to go out on the road together. And the concept of the Prairie Scrambler is the person who grows up on the prairies, who knows that they might be playing the concert, but they also might be sweeping up the community hall after the fact and turning on the coffee before the concert and selling the tickets and, doing everything that it takes. Plus, at the end of the night, they're going to stop and maybe give somebody a boost from their car on the way home. And that is a prairie scrambler. You just see what's needed and you fill that void without ego. And so getting from A to B and having a guiding light that no matter what needs to be done, nothing is beneath you. And if there's something that needs to be done that's going to move the group further together, then we can all go further together. If you want to get there slow, do it alone. And the best way we have right now with moving things forward and what those early days are for anyone who's learning how they want to be perceived in the world, which if you're in music or if you're in any sort of creative endeavor, there's an expectation now of speed that you have a comfort being behind a desk, doing an interview. But these are skills that are a lifetime of experience building. And so when I think about playing my marimba like a wild man playing the Flight of the Bumblebee when I was on TV at 16, I made a TV show that's recently been on my Instagram at Dave Pierce Music, and it blew up because it's so wild. I'm pictured there trying to pick it up again on the exact same instrument that came from the Mount Royal Conservatory. They loaned it to me for about a 2-week period over the summer, and I rekindled with this instrument that I hadn't touched for 40 years, and it contained all the music. All the music was still in it. It came out. It was a little rusty and all those things, but the idea of having the sense that you have a place to come from and a place to go is really integral in putting together where it is you want your life, how you want to feel inside as you progress. And the very best way to do that is to express yourself in some form of creative endeavor, even if it means just choosing a different route to school or a different route to work each day. Seeing if you can go 5 days and take a different route. Maybe you do 1 day without GPS. And that is a creative experience of looking around and taking notice of what's happening. We're filled with so much beauty. Look at the skyline. I love this skyline. This is the skyline that I've had over 3 decades of choreographing the fireworks through the music that I compose and arrange and produce for the Stampede. So I've had this it's the only job that I ever really wanted to have was to write the music that the city's skyline would dance to every year. And now it's been, like I say, over 3 decades of it.
When did you become a leader in this industry?
In the 4th grade, I had this moment where the class was sent off to do a creative writing project, and we needed to bring back 3 pages of foolscap paper filled with a story. And I came in and I brought my teacher, Mr. Steve Diskin, who is very formal and a great teacher, but had no idea what to do with this 40-page score that I brought in for a musical that I wrote. I took some liberties with the class project. So he said, well, why don't you bring in a piano and show us what this is? So that was the start of knowing that there was a way to lead that I could do in a very musical way. And so from that moment onward, the sense of being a leader is something that it grows inside of you, but you also need to overcome the fear of stepping out. And then you need to develop a relationship over time where you actually thrive by facing the fear. And so it's a very difficult process to go through. The moment that you are facing the decision that you are going to be a leader, that's one that becomes far easier if you believe in your heart that you were born with purpose. The searching for purpose that we all go through and are very hard on ourselves to achieve becomes almost like a thriving, nagging, uh, sort of a clamp that sits on you and can put you into imposter syndrome. It can lead to some of the fears to be the first to speak up or the first to be visual. And when those things happen in when you're young and you start to see what is possible because you want to manifest a vision that others don't have. When you start to face time and time again that your vision isn't being considered because you haven't spoken up to share your vision, that is something that, for me, music provided me a way to be a leader from inside the drums or at the piano. And then leadership really moved in over time as I started writing music scores. And the expectation that if you've written the music score, now you open it up and you stand up on a podium and you face, and it didn't start this way for me. I would seek out, every friend I had that played the bassoon or something like this to get them together to read my music to see what it would be like. But fast forward to what I do on a daily basis now, I step up on the podium and I look out, and the heroes of my every album I ever listened to as a kid, their names were on those albums, and now they're sitting in the room and I'm conducting them through my music, because leadership becomes an expectation that a leader is going to be a good leader, but it takes a lifetime of growing into that leadership. And so I see that little spark of that first moment that it happens. I go back almost on a daily basis and I thank Steve Diskin. In my mind, I go, wow, there was a teacher, some of the incredible teachers I had. Bridget Stewart, I still see her from ninth grade. All of these teachers, my grade one, my first grade teacher was my mom's best friend. And so there's so much history that happens, and it takes a community to support someone to become a leader. It's the only way I can be a leader on a global scale right now and be honored with things like Emmy Awards and things for direction. A music director is no different than a CEO. And it's, sometimes it's in a position of feeling like almost you're at a level that, being a music director for the Olympics, that's something that carries an immense amount of pressure and also the potential for leadership to become lost for all the noise that surrounds it. So when I first felt like a leader, through to when I'm leading on a daily basis, standing in very uncomfortable spots, it's always about facing that fear to take the very first step, to be the one that can be different and be heard. That's leadership.
Can you tell me what you actually do? Like, people read composer, music director, they think you're just writing music, but can you tell me what your job actually involves?
Yeah, it's more of a taking a glimpse into someone's artistry and then taking a piece of that. So, for example, the work I've done with Michael Bublé since we were teenagers together. So it's a long span, and Mike is one of the most incredible arrangers there is. Now, the art of arranging is basically creating a new version of something that exists. Maybe sometimes it doesn't exist before. It's somebody has a song idea in their head, and it's like the original prompt. So if somebody comes to you and prompts me, I have over 3 decades of experience of sitting in the room with sometimes an A-list celebrity who wants to sing, a Christmas hit, or they want to make something that has to go multi-platinum. That's a completely similar conversation to someone who's never made a song before. Or if I was to talk to you about your theme song that you'd like to have, that's part of what an arranger does. So they listen to what the issue is or what the prompt is, and then they have an immense toolbox. So if you were to picture me like, I don't know if you're a golfer, maybe some of your viewers would be a golfer or a handyman or someone who's an artist. Either way, it's like I'm a full bag of golf clubs, or I'm a full toolkit with every tool you could ever need, or I'm the artist and I'm every paintbrush that you would ever want to use if the artist thinks that I have something to bring to them. So it's like the arranger part is that you are going to sit down and you're going to listen to them, and maybe they only can play 3 notes on the piano and they've got this melody. Da, 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 da. Something that goes like that. And then you hear it and you go, yeah, I could hear the guitar doing this thing and let's get it a hook with the brass. And then the strings, let's have something that's kind of Motown-y, and next thing you know, that's the conversation that you've had. And then the next time I'll see the artist, we're often in the recording studio about to record it. So between that time and getting into the recording studio, sometimes the artist will want to hear all of the steps along the way. And other times they want to be surprised. So it depends on how they are as an artist. And in the magical experience that I've had with someone like Michael Bublé, all of the others that fit into that lane, the great singers, some of them want to have the experience of what it used to be like back in the vintage days of stepping onto a big sound stage with a giant orchestra that's reading music for the first time. That music that's on all of those stands has my name on it. And so it means from the olden days, the same as the composer, the same as anyone who expresses their talent through writing on paper, it communicates for a lifetime. And so the arranger is the person who's kind of like the scribe and the prompt taker, and then dives back into all of the various places in history that the artist wants to go and brings them all forward to wherever the artist wants to be in the future. So the conversations are often in recording studios, in the lobby, or in different spots where I'll sit like I am with you, and we'll just talk. We'll have a little coffee, and it's kind of like it doesn't look like much is happening, but it's how the day unfolds creatively that by the end of the day, a good example would be a television show and an album that I was involved in making for Bryan Adams and Friends. And it was a show called Great Big Holiday Jam. And it was on television broadcast, and then the album was released, and it featured the Bare Naked Ladies and Lights, Alan Doyle, Alicia Cara, who blew my mind. And making that show in the studio was like capturing all of the points that an artist has that they want to achieve, and it needs to have the music for it, and it needs to have direction, and it needs to know who's going to sing what, where. And when you're dealing with someone like Bryan Adams or Michael Bublé or Jan Arden or anyone else who comes from Canada, we have this incredible connection because we grew up on Canadian television. We grew up listening to the music that supported Hockey Night in Canada. Those two things were synonymous. You know, the sound of all of these things from vintage times, they all play this massive role in shaping the way an artist nowadays sounds. And so it's kind of a producer role. It's an arranger role. A lot of times it's a composing role that starts to occur. I just co-wrote 7 original songs on the Pentatonics album, which I was the executive producer for Christmas. And I think I brought you one. I had to buy this.
Thank you so much.
I had to buy this from the
Here, I'll show it to this camera.
From the merch at the concert. I think that one came. No, that one has come from Recordland, I believe. And that fulfilled a great dream of mine. Recordland, you know, down in Inglewood?
In Inglewood, yeah.
In
That's
Recordland,
awesome.
When I was 10 years old, I bought my first LP, my first vinyl. And I set a little...
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I set a little thing in my heart that someday I would go in there and buy an album that I made.
Yeah.
So I was so thrilled to see that album in there this year. And I also picked up the Michael Bublé Christmas album, which has done very well since we made that together back in 2015 or 2011. I'm not quite sure when the Bublé Christmas album was, but it started the same way as this, wanting to have the experience of what it was like in the old school days. And it's through my work with the Sinatra family over the last, I don't know, it's been a couple of decades, that the Sinatra experience, I've soaked it up so much through osmosis of being around the original musicians that played with Sinatra, the original musicians who were arrangers for Sinatra, just anything I could get from Frank Sinatra. I would soak it up and build these relationships where they became mentors of mine. All of that comes through and displayed in these experiences, like with making an album for the Pentatonics.
Is this the one that's charting right now?
This one has the first number one. The first time Frank Sinatra's been back on the charts and a number one status since 1967. We made a duet with the Pentatonics and Frank Sinatra in a long lost isolated vocal of Frank Sinatra. So I got to replace all the music underneath and record the orchestra, and the Pentatonics wanted to sing around one vintage microphone like the olden days. Like, we recreated everything. And it sets such an environment that whatever comes from these beautiful, like, the greatest singers on earth are the Pentatonics singing 5-part harmony. It's incredible to see it live and in the studio. I share some of them on my Instagram sites so you can see the behind the scenes, because I just can't get over how great musicians are that can do these magical things and then transport themselves through different times by having it just, the awareness of how to make an arrangement for an artist that wants to be feeling like it's the real thing, like they're in 1935 and they just stepped in and the harp is going and the strings and all that stuff. They want to have that feeling, but we've really lost touch of how to make the environment foster that sort of creativity. And so it's a fun thing to see these studios and put things together in the vintage way and be brought in as an arranger to make music with some of the great artists of the world. I'm really blessed.
Can you tell me a small detail in your job that most people would never think matters, but actually matters a lot? Or maybe something that no one would notice that you notice a lot?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
That is a very good question. I think being conscious of what it takes to stay grounded inside of incredible things that happen when they happen to us directly, and they come in the form of, a hit from a piece of music that was just a dream one day, and then it just came out, and to watch it go on and do incredible things on its own, and people fall in love with it, and those can be met with an immense void of balance if the focus on staying grounded and being balanced. For me, it comes through a deeply frequency-driven experience that I use sound bowls and gongs, and I have a very a reset that occurs each day through my ritual of working with these frequencies and sound baths and putting myself in a position where I've kind of cleansed the harmonic palette to be able to approach whoever I'm working with each day. And sometimes I'm working with artists who are legacy artists, like they're no longer alive, but it's working with their tracks and coming up with new creative ideas that are stemmed in who that artist was as a person, what they believed in, and how they felt. That's a lot of the research and the deep connection that I go after with all of the artists that I get to work with. So it becomes very important to stay grounded in and have the skills to make that happen. And so staying grounded and having tricks for yourself that will help you as you travel or you do things in your day, whether it's just running errands or if it's flying to the other side of the earth to conduct an orchestra. Having things that you can draw on. So if it's if it's a button that means something to you that your grandmother had fall off a sweater and it was the last thing that you had, or if it's something that holds a memory in some of the ways that we, like rub our fingers or sounds that calm us, or a certain key. There's a note that I wrote in a song called Humankind. I co-wrote this song, which is my favorite song I've ever written. The one I'm most proud of, and it's an anthem for my mother. And the last 30 seconds of it contains the final moment I had with my mom in the hospital as she died. And I held her head and I shared the breathing with her until I knew it was her final breath. And I changed my breathing so I could intake her final breath. And then I wrote this song that has that moment from the last 30 seconds, roughly, of the song. And it ends with that breath intake, which is just slightly under the note G. And you hear the pentatonics on Humankind singing that G. They go, mm. And that is the frequency that I released my mother's breath at. I just wanted to see what my voice would do. And so seldom do we explore what our voices are. And so singing is something that allows us to be able to create a sound through the vibration of our vocal cords. And it's an incredible thing to make a sound that you don't use your brain to think of what note you're going to sing. You just see what frequency comes out, what rattles around. So for me, got a few other things in my package. This is a special gift for you.
Okay.
And me.
Should I open it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think. We'll see.
We'll see. Now, this is airing after the season that I'm the jolliest and the holliest in, because I love the joy of making Christmas music and hearing it everywhere from New York to LA, Calgary, Toronto, and everywhere in between.
My dogs are going to lose it. This is amazing.
This is perfect. This is a very high-end kazoo. Now, what I was just talking about, vibrating your vocal cords.
I'm going to wait for your demonstration.
Oh.
How did you do that?
Now, try and make a do. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Should I take this off?
No, just do-do-do-do-do-do. No, you can leave that on. That's the mouthpiece. Don't start going and modifying this thing until you know what you're going to use it for. And then you can modify it by putting soup it up. But
okay, what do I do? How do I do it?
So before you even touch this thing.
Did it.
Okay, now do that. Exact same thing with that in your mouth.
Should I try again?
Sure. Go again. Stay in time. You got a new theme.
Yes. Thank you. I'm a musician too now.
That
was the best thing I've ever done musically, honestly.
Really? Yeah, isn't that something? And that's the magic of vibrating your voice and using that as really the tough little thing that happens in a day is making sure that I stay in touch with myself. That's the thing people wouldn't know about.
I'm glad I asked
all these things. The kazoo plays a very important role for me. This is the instrument that I can turn my voice into an instrument. And so if I'm working on something that's like, let's say it's, the music for the bubbly.
Yeah.
So when we were in the studio making that comes from When You're Smiling by Michael Bublé. And that arrangement, I'm in the studio, and you can see these on the behind the scenes that I do on my Instagram. And it's now you do all of that into this. Now you can hear the trumpets like in a Sinatra band, right? And then here comes the saxophones. The whole world smiles with you. And that is what is possible. You should hear what is going on in my head right now. Actually, you can. You can just stream When You're Smiling from Michael Bublé. And you'll hear what that translates into. And it's that tiny little skill that I got from my hometown of Calgary.
That's
Being
amazing.
able to hand out music and hear musicians play my music back to me. And that is the piece that's so special to me in writing the music for the fireworks for these 3 decades, that this has happened with the Skyline. It's being able to translate and stand on that dirt and go, and fanfare. And it's like, I'm picturing, this is my home. Fanfares of the trumpets, and it all turns into the Olympics. And from there, it becomes about making music and not being afraid to step out and say, hey, I've got an idea. What about playing a kazoo? And that little spark of an idea, don't ever underestimate how much that's going to intrigue someone who's young, wondering what they're here for and what their purpose is. At 7 years old, if they hear a kazoo and they try it out, and when they're doing it themselves, they picture a Michael Bublé band going, that is something that is a piece of magic that you, as someone in a community that lives in you go and you run your errands, those are your moments of example that create the rest of our community. And Calgary is the greatest place on earth to build community, especially if you know how to translate something that seems like magic into something that everyone can enjoy and share and love and be passionate about. I'm passionate about this Skyline having fireworks that are dancing to my music. I'm so passionate about it that's what keeps me in Calgary. I've never left because of it.
I'm going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the Olympics, the Emmy, all of that.
Sounds great.
We'll be back. Hey, everyone. If you're new to the show, please subscribe on YouTube. Lots of listeners on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. Keep subscribing there. Share it with someone. If you think it's a cool concept, share it with your friends. We want to keep it going. So, yeah, thanks so much. Stay tuned for more Deets. And we're back. I want to talk about the Olympics. So what was it like to be asked to work on the Olympics? And what did that responsibility feel like?
To be asked to work on the Olympics was a special experience for me because I had set my sights on it when I was 14 years old in Calgary at 88. So for the 2010 Olympics, to be asked at that point, I felt like I wasn't quite ready. And so I had to face the fear right up front that it was like, okay, I've been making all these fireworks happen over the skyline of the city, and I've been making the grandstand show music, and I've been working at with the Rockettes at Radio City and in dance worlds everywhere I could be, but I still didn't feel like I was ready for the Olympics. And then once I got into that, I discovered that if I could imagine it on a scale that I could understand, like organizing a wedding or making a grandstand show or something that I was familiar with at that point, then I could achieve what I needed to do with the Olympics.
Was there a moment where you kind of realized that this is much bigger than anything you've done before?
Yeah, there was certainly one moment where I was in a meeting ahead of the opening ceremonies, and I was writing the music. I was the music director of the ceremony, so I was looking at the position of where the orchestra was, and I raised my hand and I said, of the 60,000 people that are in the stadium, half of them won't see this thing happen. And I was reminded that the viewership was 3 point some odd billion people watched that opening ceremonies on everything from early days of smartphones all the way through to televisions in the jungle. It had to sound good no matter where people were watching it. And so that was a big leap.
Can you walk me through what your role was so that the audience can picture it?
Yeah, the role of music director for the Olympics involves knowing and getting into the fabric of what the community is. For example, with Los Angeles coming up, it's my second home. I've been working there for so long in my life as far as like creative work, and it's part of understanding what the fabric, the sound of it is. And I cite Los Angeles because that one's coming up in 28, and whoever's doing that role is going to be looking at knowing how to put together all of the community that is hopefuls. So it isn't just the studio musicians who have had the 30 and 40-year careers of making movie music in LA, but it's the ones that, those are the heroes. Who are the children, the young people, the young performers who are set in their sights, or the 96-year-old who's taken up the trumpet at the end of life? It's all of those people, and finding them and putting them together, and then putting them in a spot where they are creating music in a world stage. And now they've got their heroes sitting in the trumpet section beside them. And then you record all of that music, and so that they can hear it come back, and they can't believe it's their sound. And you've crafted a sound that is captured in time. If you listen to music from 1988 and you hear, bum, one hit, I won't do any more, so there's no copyright strikes. But, there was a theme that David Foster wrote, and, big, huge moment for me was just being on the planet at the same time that David Foster came from Canada and had the career that he has had and continues to have. And now when I have moments where I get to see him, I go like, this is quite amazing that we get to be in this Olympic thing together and share it with all of these people. That then you look up and there's a 2,000 voice choir, and I'm conducting, and these things are happening, and stars who I've only ever heard their voice come from the radio. Someone like Bryan Adams sitting there in the room starts singing, and you recognize that voice, and you go, that's the real thing. That's not, AI. That's not anybody doing a knockoff. There's something so special about everyone's voice that when you get to the end of having put it all together, you've captured exactly that moment in time that will be emulated for years and decades to come. Every time somebody is saying, oh, let's have that sound that came from the 2028 Olympics. We might be in 2050 and looking for someone who knows what that sound is, because they want to recreate it for some other artist that's bringing 5 or 6 ideas from the past forward to that period in time, like we talked about before. And now we're at that spot where it's like, you've got this Olympic sound, and you can create it because someone was the music director, and they looked at everything that was happening in that time and said, this is a snapshot in a musical sense that's going to be known for this event. And the Olympic movement is one of the most beautiful worldwide events because it focuses on art, sport, and the culture of how those things come together. And so there's equal amounts of culture that come along with the sport. So when a city hosts the Olympics and you're the music director of the Olympics, it's like it's a silver, gold, and bronze metal all at once. And if you drop any of the three, you really feel it in your heart that you've let down something that was important to you. Because musically, you want to represent everything that gives you joy as a composer or as a music director. It gives everything else back through the musical notes that are remembered. And the musical events, it's like We Are the World on steroids. Just all the different voices and all the things that you get to put together. It is something that is so fulfilling. And I really hope that it becomes, over time, that the music director or the arranger or some of the people that are behind the scenes really get an opportunity to capture the knowledge that sometimes becomes such immense wisdom, and then we lose it because the mentor or the hero passes on and takes that information with them, and we don't mentorship enough to capture that special thing that makes it possible that someone can look out over Vancouver, like myself, every night and just capture the energy and the sound and the frequency of the city and the province and then the country. To know that you're going to export that to the world and to reach everybody's heart is so fulfilling if you can get it right. And that moment in the Vancouver Olympics when Katie Lang was singing Hallelujah, we hadn't yet had a lifetime of the Pentatonics or the anyone else who sang on American Idol. Hallelujah in 2010 was still very sacred. And we used Hallelujah for the peace moment in lieu of releasing Doves or any of the other long-time significant ways of signaling peace. In those particular games, we used that song with Katie Lang's voice singing it to reach 3 billion people collectively hearing music that came from their phones, their headphones, their speakers, their cars. No matter where it came from, it had to have the same message. And that's the power of music. And that's what is so sacred about being the music director of the Olympics.
How did you feel when your dream that you've had for 12 years has been realized now and it's over, the Olympics are over? Did you think what's next, or how did you feel at that moment?
That was a tough moment. It really was. I was in a very unusual situation because I had a Broadway show that had the music of Frank Sinatra that I had worked together with the choreographer Twyla Tharp. We opened on Broadway about 3 days after the Olympics closed. So I catapulted into a completely different environment. And it was successful and it was busy and there was red carpets and all of these things happened. And I went through a series of moments that then led to quite a low period where about 3 months later, there was the most amazing Grammys that were on. And I felt like people were forgetting about the Olympics, and it was this 20 some odd year dream of mine to do it. And I committed myself to it, and it happened. And then it felt very quiet. And I wasn't sure if it was because I had stayed so far behind the scenes and didn't tell anybody or show anybody the beauty of what it means to make something. Because in 2010, we were just focused on what happened on the stage. Just what was the produced piece. We didn't have the option to see the behind the scenes that we do nowadays. And so the feeling that the whole thing was over, and now what? It really was a time where I had to face what that meant and just accept that maybe everybody forgot about the Olympics. And I had gone for a long shot and I had won all of these gold medals. Like, yeah, I felt like they were mine because my music was playing, this is the bronze music and this is the silver music. And I'm watching all these things and I'm hearing all my French horns and my harp and my, all the things that are going on. That was exquisite. That was a lot of awards that were given out. And then it was very quiet for me creatively. And I started finding that I loved working with vocalists and the voice, and all of those things started coming back. And I looked to the people, the musicians that I had connected with through the Olympics in Los Angeles. And I started to go and spend time with my mentors and some of the people that I had always held as heroes but hadn't reached out to, and I was calling them for coffee and things like that happening. And it was through that time that I was starting to make those friends that one of them said, it would be probably quite beneficial for you to become a peer in the Television Academy. And I was like, I hadn't thought when I made the music happen at the Olympics, all of those decisions would be looked on by my peers around the world. And so then that was quite a tall order to join the peer group of the Television Academy. But what I learned was then I was nominated for an Emmy Award for the opening ceremonies of the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. And in those Olympics it turned out the peer group watched them and thought it was outstanding. And I was nominated in a list that included my heroes, Mark Shaman, David Foster, Sheila E. Like, I couldn't believe the company I was keeping on this list. I felt like I'm not worthy. Like, it felt like such a weight. And then it became a bigger thing when at the Emmys, they called my name out and they played the music, and I was literally hobbling down the aisle because I had just had this like crazy night with Michael Bublé at the Saddle Dome in Calgary, where I wiped out on a Segway racing around the outside of the Saddle Dome, and I smashed my hip on the cement and knocked over a bunch of catering trays. So that was only a week or so before the Emmys happened. And now here I am being called up to the Emmys. And I look in the aisle and there's David Foster and there's Mark Shaman. And both of those guys just inspired so much of how I desired to write music and to desire to write it for the Olympics and specialize in how it feels for a community to come together and celebrate and mark something on a global level. That can only be done through music. Things like Hallelujah or Winter Games or some of the music that ends up becoming something for us to celebrate for decades to come. And that is what is so important about being the music director of the Olympics, but also knowing how that fits in to a community like Calgary, where I want to feel at home and be able to still practice my art. And that's what the Skyline, the fireworks of the Skyline in Calgary every year during the Calgary Stampede, that's what I get from all of those experiences coming together.
So, in a career where your best work might sometimes go unnoticed, what is your relationship with recognition like that, like an Emmy or any awards?
Those are fantastic questions.
Thanks.
The award is something that is to be kind of like the mirror or the test of balance and groundedness, because the award actually doesn't mean what you often think it does. It's a balancer to the yin and yang of how we live our lives. So if we are in a spot where you've got the award and you let it get to you, you let it get to your head that you've achieved something, that's ego. And when that surfaces, it needs to have some immediate focus to balance it on the other side, to make sure that you understand that you are being recognized for something that you might not understand. You might never understand what it is, why someone has been triggered to suggest that another person receives a trophy of some sort. That's a very large scope that we don't really have a sense of what it means when you are recognized with something that is an internationally recognized award like an Emmy. And so it carries something that very meaningfully, it impacts the person who has it. And for an example, I was honored with a degree from the University of Calgary. And there is a very deep moment that was actually the kind of the if I was stuck on a river floating down the river and I needed somebody to throw a branch and save me, amidst all of the awards that I achieved and were being honored with at that time, it was the one that I didn't understand. And that was the one I was so happy came from my hometown. And I got to speak on that stage and have a moment where I wasn't making music, where I got to share my voice about how passionate I am about the places that I live and that I get to create in, the experience of making a song for the Pentatonics that's called Christmas in the City. And it captures how I feel about Calgary, but it also captures how I feel about New York. And you can definitely hear in the music how I feel about Los Angeles and the beautiful creative beings that are in those big centers, including Vancouver, and Toronto, and all of the Canadian musicians who work together to be international artists. There's such a special group of people. And I find that knowing that there is help and support from them to say, hey, I just won this award. Can you help me? I don't know what it means or how to handle this. And to be able to call, the first call I made was to Michael Bublé. And I said, hey, bud, I won this thing. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. It's like, there's something about being able to share the excitement and also to say, hey, I want to remain as grounded as I see you being grounded when you get a Grammy award, or, how does that feel? That is something that we really share as Canadians. And it's something that's in us because I think it's cold all the time. And we know that our lives might depend on each other, and a stranger's life might depend on each other if we are all the people that we have in a snowstorm. And then it might be that you're inside someone's house and a kitchen party turns into a song that becomes a number one hit. That's the beauty of the scale of what we have in Canada.
Did you feel like that moment was closure on that chapter or momentum for the next chapter?
It was definitely momentum, but it was momentum I didn't know how to use. And so I just continued to do my thing. And it was through that momentum that it allowed me to do my thing on a larger scale and on a global scale.
So do you prefer working behind the scenes, or are you getting pulled to a more visible role?
It's learning to live with a balance between the two. It's new for me to be so much more on the scene and to be the artist. But I do feel like I enjoy the role and I enjoy stepping out from behind the scenes with this immense wealth of stories and the desire that I have to storytell and to share what it would mean for helping move things forward. So to bring the vintage concept and move it forward, that's really quite exciting to do.
How far in advance are you working on something like the Olympics or any of these big live events? How much goes into it? How long does something take for the prep before the actual event?
Sometimes it's an 18-month type of thing. The Olympics in 2010, I believe we started having symposiums on that in 2008 and creative discussions with everybody from around the country. And then you put them together, you start to refine the ideas, and then it might become a smaller team, something like 5 or 6 people. Sometimes it becomes one person that feeds it. It depends on how fast you need to go. So sometimes there might be a moment where we need to respond to an immediate thing. So you might have something like a production that has to come together in 6 days, or it has to come together in 3 days. That's when you see I recognize a lot of the people who work in the front line of production because we're all rock solid in the speed at which you can do something if you don't have 18 months. So you see a lot of the same people working on things that are 18 months out. And then if something comes up on the side, it's not a singular focus. What happens for the creative people working at this level is that quite often, the more they do, the better they become at doing it all because they're exposed inside of one creative cycle. They get exposed to another creative cycle. And sometimes that has a different budget attached to it. Sometimes that has a different need attached to it in what kind of human you're trying to make something for. All of those things come together so that they feed each other and become bigger and better every time. Sometimes you see magical drones. I'm writing music for those robot dogs. I wrote the first ballet for those.
Wow.
And we presented it at the Grandstand show during the Calgary Stampede. And so while those were happening, then there's, you see something somewhere else and you start putting these things together and it's like you're making a special magical potion for each of them because they feed off of each other. And then there comes a moment where 18 months becomes a year and then it shrinks down. And then you're in the same spot that you were with that other 4-day event that you worked on. You're in the same spot with your 18-month event. It's now got the intensity of the 4-day event because now you have all of the sponsors and the dinners and all of the things that start to happen right before an event goes on. It eliminates the ability for someone without experience to be able to look at how you're going to maintain your team for 4 days before something like an Olympic ceremony happens. And you need to have the exact same acumen as if you were, 3 days before a wedding for your for your brother. You know, it's like something that feels like family. It's the same feeling that if you let down anybody, it isn't going to happen. It isn't going to be good. It isn't going to be the Olympic gold medal. And so I remember the headline in the Calgary Herald when I won the Emmy Award. I came back the next day and I flew into town and I went to the CBC radio to do an interview. And they said, "Hey, you're on the front page of the paper." And it said, "One more gold for Canada." And that was the thing that lifted me out of that depth that I was in from that moment. And all of those things go together to make that.
What's the hardest part for you? Is there any part of the job that even after all the years of doing it successfully still makes you uneasy?
Yeah, it's missing my friends, and it's so much alone time. It's a lot of time where the ideas are happening because of going on a walk on a certain path, or feeling like things happen when the creativity flows, and knowing the dance with the muses and respecting that dance when the muses come by, that they're going to come by on a regular basis if it becomes a relationship that you build. But it's an invisible relationship to the outside world. And so quite often it can mean that I love going out to see the theater. And when I go out to the theater, I'm also in a state of absorbing other people's creativity. And so those two things just tend to balance that way. So it's a lot of introvert, and the extrovert is someone who is, when it seems like there's an extroversion there, it's also, I sometimes have to go inside of myself even more to be certain that I don't become overstimulated and want to go home and start creating based on what I just saw. It's a lot harder to stock it up and save it and remember those feelings that come, and then use maybe 30% of the joy that comes from seeing other work. So when you go to live theater, for example, like Theatre Calgary, we just came out of the season of Charles Dickens and Christmas Carol. I received so much inspiration from seeing their new version that I believe you had Stafford on here as a guest. That's a great series of videos. If your viewers go back and see those, Stafford is absolutely incredible. This production of Christmas Carol inspired me with Scott Hoying and Mark Hoying to write a song called Bah Humbug that the Pentatonics performed during their season. And it's based visually and creatively very much on what I saw and experienced from my friend Doug McKeag, who plays Scrooge. The way he plays Scrooge developed how Scrooge sounds in that song with the Pentatonics. And that's a creative thread that is just the joy of humanity.
If someone wanted to do what you do at this high of a level, what is something that they would need to respect early on?
I go back to those early days that I talked about, where I was 5 and 6 years old, and seeing myself as different and accepting that I don't need to harness that difference, but instead I need to figure out how to express that thing that's different. In my case, it was music. I loved making music, and I loved dressing to make the music. And I loved being in a spot where when I felt myself my most comfortable was when I was making music. And it was all that other stuff in between, the going to the gym class and all of the things that are part of being in school, and then holding on to your joy. Smile, laugh, have fun. Try and find the fun in everything. that's the little piece that I was afforded at a young age by being a prodigy. I was always playing music with people that were 40 and 50 years older than I was. So I would be in a spot where I was sitting around a band room or in between things playing. I was a young child and I was hearing so much of the spark of joy and fun and laugh that could happen, or it could also not happen if somebody was angry and grumpy about it. But I got to see that, and I made a promise to myself never to lose that. And there has been times where I've felt like I might be losing it, but it's a really important thing for anyone who wants to be at a certain level. It doesn't matter how you define it. The global level that I'm so fortunate and blessed to get to work at, it's not always in alignment with what that little 5-year-old was dreaming about. But when you know that it's this thing that started back when you said, I'm always going to have whatever it is in your heart, if you can find a way to stick with that, then when you get to this level, and whatever the definition of this level is, it might just be that you could leave your house and walk from your parents' car into the kindergarten. Or it might be that you're 96 years old and you've managed to go to the store and deal with paying with a credit card and not seeing a human being. Those accomplishments are so big that if you receive them without remembering to smile and remembering to have fun and enjoy them as a little accomplishment to you, or maybe the biggest accomplishment in the world, winning an award or seeing something that you've dreamt up of in the Olympics and having people for the rest of my life, I think the joy I get from having people say, I loved when those whales went across the floor and they blew up the water in the Olympics, or I loved when the pentatonics did this thing and everybody was singing in different ways and then it all came together at the end. Those are little pieces of magic that I get to have something to do with. And I take that very, very seriously. And remember that started with the idea that I just didn't want to lose the joy and the fun in myself. It's there in all of us. We just need to take a moment and play a kazoo or put on a song and dance to it. You know, it's very easy to have ways to find joy. It's just giving ourselves the permission to experience the joy.
I have only one more question for you. What is next in your sights? What's your next Olympics?
Oh, well, I can hope it is the next Olympics. That would be fabulous. I love Los Angeles. And it's where it started for me. 1984, seeing that opening ceremony for Los Angeles. And they had all of these white pianos playing Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and a sing-along section with everybody dressed. I mean, they were in the 80s, so they were all dressed in the 80s, and it was amazing. I love that ceremony. And that was the first ceremony that I had a videotape machine for. And so I was about 12 years old, and my entire family had gone into Winnebago on their summer trip. I stayed back by myself in the house so I could tape the opening ceremonies of the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. I can hardly say it. I'm so excited about it. And I watched that tape over and over again. And it really led me to where things are headed for 28. And I really feel like where I would like to go in the community is to be able to share a lot more of the history of Calgary and what it means on a global scale. When the opportunity to be in a niche and also get to live where you want to live and have these roots that are so important, that is something that comes from being born and bred in a community or coming from some other place and finding that you can feel the feeling of home when you're in Calgary or when you're in New York or when you're in Los Angeles. That feeling of having your calm, your calmness and your purpose, when it is felt inside your heart and it gets attached to a piece of music, you have the joy of being able to take that music with you anywhere you go. And so I would say the great things that come from anyone's dreams and desires to change their life by becoming the person they think they want to be, it's only through the experimentation of trying to step out and create your vision and make it something that if only one other person connects with you and sees it, that's where the benefit is. It isn't in all of the millions of people that you think you might need to stream to or that you might need to reach in order to become somebody who's heard. It isn't that way at all. It's just that you need to find a way to express your greatest feelings. And if you are someone like myself who was born to make music that make people excited and patriotic and feeling love for their country and love for their Olympics and love for anything that they are wanting to have that feeling of peace and jubilation, that's something that I was put on the earth to make and make it through music. And I just love sharing one person or a million people. It doesn't matter. It provides the same amount of back and forth that music is only capable of providing. And so it's been such a pleasure to be on your show and to connect with you with what you're doing here with your production. I must say I'm just blown away by having been the music director for so many things where I look on what's happening and to engage with you in the setting that I recognize from Hollywood or anywhere else that I've been on a set. It's really nice to see that you're trying so hard and that you have reached as many people as you have. And your questions are absolutely mind-blowing to me. The depth and the way that you peeled me apart today like an onion and allowed me to share my stories and also allowed me to share my passion for the places that we live in and call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming here as Avenue Magazine's best dressed.
Hey,
we didn't mention that.
Exactly. Well, you know, it's another joy. And I just am grateful to the people of Avenue Magazine for seeing me as best dressed, but also for opening a community for all the other winners and the parts that were part of this magazine that are represented in the community. And for Avenue, it's Calgary and the Canadians that appear in it. It's really been special to step into a new community. So I have to thank them too.
Do you want to plug anything? You're probably lost. Maybe your Instagram, all the projects you're involved in?
I'd love to have more people come by and see the behind the scenes. And that's at Dave Pierce Music. My link tree is something that we'll provide to you. And if you can share it with everyone. And I think going to the link tree is the best way to see, you know, all the offshoots of the things, what I'm doing in my fashion world, as well as what is happening in my music world. And then also for being able to have me come and speak. I love keynote speaking, and I'm absolutely thrilled that the leadership of what it takes to be the music director of something like the Olympics is being recognized as leadership, like a CEO or anyone else. And so I'm really enjoying starting to be able to speak more about the experiences.
Amazing. I'll put it in the description of I'll link it everywhere.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that.
Thanks
you.
so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I just take these off now and it ends immediately.
Da-da-da. Oh, we got kazoos. We could play it off. That's called the outro.